La-di-da, do-do-do-do. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are live, sort of. This is a recorded video. It's not live. But hey, welcome to DIY guitar making. Here at Eric Schaefer Guitars, we're going to do a Q&A. Haven't done a Q&A in a while. And also, before I do my Q&A, take a look at this. Pretty sweet, right? So we're not going to talk about this today, but just kind of giving you a preview, because if you guys are following along, I am going through this orchestra model build for David in California right now, and recording it day by day and presenting it to you guys and my thoughts on what's happening as I'm doing it. So that's where I'm at. I've got a sound box. Pretty cool. So you'll see that in another episode coming out soon. Let's go ahead and jump right into your questions. Okay, first we got another beard comment. Yes, I like those. This is from The Boardroom, and he writes, another nice video. In no time you will have a string problem. They will catch on that beard, rocking beard. All right, thank you. I'm not sure I know what you mean. I guess he means when I play the guitar, at some point my beard will get in the way of the strings. And yes, that would be a pretty serious problem. Hey, it looks like you have a pretty sweet beard too. He's got a little thumbnail of his face there. Anyway, you didn't come here for beard talk. Okay, David Harris writes, I'm 65. I'm one guitar in. Do I have time for 15? Okay. What? I knew this question was going to come up, actually, or some variation of this question. I did a video called Voicing the Soundboard. It was day 5 of this build right here. I voiced the soundboard, and I kind of talked at length a little bit about how just as a general rule, I came up with the 15th guitar as the number guitar when you first start to actually notice some things about the voicing process. So I always encourage people to just get started with tapping and flexing and all of that stuff that I've talked about in those other videos. I'm not going to talk about here. You can watch those previous videos to learn more about that. Essentially, I just encourage people to start tapping and flexing, and in the beginning, you're not going to notice anything. You're going to feel stupid doing it. You should feel a little stupid doing it because, I mean, you know, you're tapping on wood and listening to it. It's kind of a weird thing to do. But if you just keep doing that as you're shaping the braces, it's going to vary greatly from one person to another, but I would say at about your 15th guitar, you will actually just start to get a sense of some of the things that are going on as you're shaping those braces. So he's saying he's 65. Does he have time for 50? I don't know. I don't know how long you're going to live, dude. I hope you have time. But, you know, I say that laughing just because, you know, I don't know. I'm staring at a screen here. I don't know how healthy you are. Work out, eat the right things, and you can live 65 is not that old. You can live a long life and produce a lot of guitars as well. And, but all joking aside, I totally get the sentiment that he's talking about in this field of guitar making. It even affects me too. Like, one of the depressing things is just how long it takes to go through iterations of what we do. Okay, if we were building cutting boards, we would have no problem, batching out a whole bunch of cutting boards, even within the same month or week. But when you're building a guitar, realistically, especially as a hobbyist, which a lot of you guys are, you're probably building one guitar a year. That's very common in the hobby world, and in the professional solo builder world, honestly, it's not uncommon to still only be building like 3 or 4 guitars a year. So I totally get the sentiment. Everything moves at a snail's pace in the acoustic guitar building world. I say acoustic because obviously it's a little quicker in the electric guitar world. But anyway, the point I want to make about this is, first of all, to be a guitar builder, you don't actually have to do any of this voicing stuff, okay? Any of this voodoo here. There are plenty of guitar builders. I mean, literally every factory builder, every company, but also even some individual builders who build to spec, okay? They just don't really bother with all of that, you know, individual attention and the tapping and the flexing and all that stuff. I think it definitely adds something. That's why I do it, to do the voicing, but you could just build guitars. And if you're watching this, then I'm assuming that you are building guitars, or at least you're interested in getting started with building guitars. Now, you could just always build to spec, like I talked about. But the point I'm getting at here is that you might as well, as bad at it as you will be in the beginning, and maybe even for the rest of your life, you'll never get it. You'll never, like, start to get it, I should say, because you never master voicing, but there's a point where you just start to move in the right direction. Let's just assume that you're never going to get there. If you're building guitars anyway, you're already putting in all this time to build a guitar, it doesn't really add any significant additional time to just trust yourself and do a little bit of tapping. Right? Do a little bit of flexing, maybe occasionally read an article or two about it, and just keep doing that, okay? It takes months for most people to build a guitar, an acoustic guitar. The flexing and the tapping and the little bit of extra carving that goes along with that is minutes on your build, okay? So all I'm saying is you might as well get started doing it. And you know what? When I mentioned the number 15, I actually thought hard about that, because I wanted to give you something realistic, but not excessively discouraging. Because let me tell you something. I have an interesting story about this. When I was first getting started, early on in my guitar making, I knew that I wanted to do this as a business. So I started doing, along with learning the process of guitar building, as I was going, I was also learning how to run a business. And in the modern age, or at least at that time, now you got all this social media stuff, but at the time, doing SEO, search engine optimization things, were very important for running your own website. And I remember I had emailed a bunch of people in the industry, actually, with, you know, some particular question or an ask. I was asking them for something. I don't remember what. That's not the important part. I got this one email back from this one guy who I'm not going to name, and honestly, it wouldn't matter if I named him because he's not known in the industry. But he messaged me back, and with a very deflating response, intentionally discouraging is the only way I could describe this response. And I remember one of the things he had said is that you can't expect to make a good guitar until your 300th guitar. Now, I mentally, I just, you know, ran a little math in my head real quick, and I realized that even at my age, I was going to be dead by my 300th guitar. So a comment like that is only meant to say that it's not possible, that there's no hope for anyone to build good guitars, which is just obviously ridiculous, okay? Even though there's some truth to very sort of discouraging remarks like that, you know, in a sense, we're not going to build, you can't expect to build the perfect guitar. I mean, no one really can. We live in this physical universe that we don't have absolute control over the physics of sound in a way that we would like to, okay? So really, we are just working with the capabilities that we have and the tools we have at hand to manipulate the sound, but there's so much complexity involved that it's never going to be perfect, even in the best case. So what's more helpful for people to understand when they're trying to tackle the physics of sound is, how far in should I expect to be before I feel like I'm making progress? And that, I would say, is your 15th guitar. Okay? You'll never master it. I talked about that in the last one. There is not even the 300th. You will not make perfect guitars at your 300th guitar if, anyone lives to make a 300th guitar. Let me pause for one moment to mention something. So, you guys who are following this, this build is guitar number 106. I have this labeled as. So that gives you the impression that I have personally, by myself, alone in my shop, built 106 guitars. And actually, that's not even true. So I'm not as far along as you might think. The numbering system that I use has a purpose that is not just simply vanity metrics. It's not me trying to say, hey, look how many guitars I built. It is for the purpose of cataloging the guitars so that as I'm building them, I don't lose track of which parts belong where. I have shelves back here, which you guys have seen before in previous videos. I call them bunks sometimes. And those bunks are where specific builds rest, okay? It's where I accumulate all the parts for a specific build so I can start to make those various decisions of, okay, I'm going to use Macassar ebony for the fretboard. I'm going to use this Nicaraguan rosewood for the back and sides. Those bunks are where I assemble all that and make sense of it. And at the beginning of every guitar, I give it a number. Not at the end, like you would see for a serial number in a factory. At the beginning, I give every guitar a number. And sometimes actually quite often, I will finish a guitar. For example, these parlor guitars, which are guitars number 86 and 87, I'm going to finish those after I finish guitar number 106. How is that possible? It's possible because, again, the number is a tag that I put on the instrument at the beginning of the build. And some builds, if they're really novel and complicated, might take 2 years. And other builds might take 3 months. So, and then finally, the whole reason I brought up the numbering system is because I wanted to say that also when I have a class, I have 2 students in my workshops, me and the students work together to build their guitars. And again, for the sake of organizing things, because when students come to me, sometimes they have specific things they want in a build. They might want to mix up the tone woods that we're using in the build. I use the bunk system, so their guitar gets a number. So actually, number 10, I'm at the 106th guitar right now. That is the 106th guitar to leave this shop, not the 106th that I have by myself solo built, because the student guitars are included in the count, okay? I actually don't know what number, where I'm at with the ones that I've just built myself, but just to throw a number out, it might be in the, 50 range, okay? So, just to, give you guys some realism there so you don't see those numbers that are really just tags for the guitars and think that I'm producing at a quicker rate than I am, because the workshops that I host are a part of that number. Where was I going with that? All right, let's do another question. I think I've rambled enough on that one. Just finished my first steel string. Making the soundboard was such a worry for me. The only problem is I just bought a new Martin a couple months ago and mine blows it away. I guess I did something right. That's awesome. Well, there we go. After that, the first comment, we have a very encouraging comment from a new builder there. Yeah, as you start to get into real guitar making, building flat top acoustic guitars, you start to realize that the pedestal that Martin is on is not as high as you thought previously. This isn't to bash the Martin company. They produce some of the best factory guitars, but when you start building them yourself, and especially if you're getting into that voicing that I was talking about, you will find quite quickly that you can beat a Martin. Okay, that's kind of the first hurdle to jump over. Can I make a better guitar? Well, maybe you're in your first build, you're just trying to make a better guitar than like a low-end Takamine or something. But it's not a big leap then to make guitars that sound better than Martin's. All right, and I'm going to get eaten alive for that comment. Good vid. Thanks. At 13:08, 13 minutes, 8 seconds, you use a file to fit the notch on the cross brace. Is that a 1/4 inch StewMac nut bottom file? It is exactly that, sir. That's from Fred Williams, asked that question. Yeah, this is it right here. So you can cut lap joints with, because that's what he was asking about. I did a video where I was cutting a bunch of lap joints, similar to the joint that you would cut on the X-Brace. And you can cut those like I teach in the online course, just with a Suzuki saw and a small chisel, like an 1/8 of an inch chisel. So you make your 2 cuts on the side and then you just pop out the little piece in the middle. Or I have recently discovered for myself that the 1/4 inch file in my particular case, with the dimensions that I use for my brace blanks, this file happens to, in a single cut, make the perfect notch for me. So it's just quicker and it's more repeatable. I don't have to make 2 cuts and then pop it out with the chisel. I can just make 1. So, well, for you guys at home, if you're using 6mm wide bracing, as I am, my braces are cut to 6mm in width, then this 1/4 inch file, which a 1/4 inch is just a hair under 6mm, this 1/4 inch file works perfect for it. Because like I talked about in a previous video, when I'm cutting lap joints, I like to cut them just a hair undersized, and because the spruce or cedar, whatever you're using for brace wood, compresses so readily, I'll cut those a hair undersized and then just force fit them a little bit. And, you know, just keep in mind, like I say the word force, you don't want to overdo this. If it really doesn't want to go in, then you need to make your notch a little bit bigger. But if you know that it just takes a little force to pop that in, go ahead and press it and let the spruce compress a little bit, and it's actually a better fit than if you aim for, you know, perfect or a little bit wide. Okay, so a little bit of a press fit. And you can do it quicker if you're using 6mm wide bracing and a 1/4 inch StewMac nut seating file. DALG Guitars writes, I'm currently reading the Samaji books for the 2nd time. You've done a great job explaining the top and how it functions. Well, thank you, DALG. Yeah, a lot of my understanding of the top comes from those books. I know exactly what you're talking about. He says books because Samaji has written a 2-part series of books. These 2 books kind of go together. One is called The Responsive Guitar, and the other one is called Making the Responsive Guitar. So The Responsive Guitar is a theory book. So it's all about the principles of the modal the modes of the top, right? And about the cube rule for braces and, you know, bridge construction, all kinds of stuff, locating the bridge optimally, all of that stuff, but without any of the, you know, practicalities of actually shaping and cutting wood and assembling parts. And then making the responsive guitar is the practical aspects and the how-to sort of version. Although, honestly, even making the responsive guitar, it's like Samaji can't help himself but to sort of go down the rabbit hole into theory. So even when you read Making the Responsive Guitar, there's a lot of, doesn't read like an instruction book or an instruction manual. There's a lot of good theory in there. So those are great books to read, and in his case, reread. And I appreciate you saying that. A lot of what I'm saying comes from those two books, honestly. Eric or anyone reading the comments. I'm looking for tips on preventing soundboard cracks other than making sure it is always humidified. And let's see, someone responded here. Oh, no, he continued his question. All right, so he's looking for tips on preventing soundboard cracks other than making sure it is always humidified. During the build process, that is. Torrefied, less likely to crack in the long term? Says that with a question mark. Or is it a matter of soundboard thickness? I try to keep mine between 2.5 and 2.9 millimeters. Other than making sure it's always humidified. So he's talking about how to build your... Okay. How do you build resiliency into your top in the first place so that it doesn't crack? Yeah, honestly... There's a serious trade-off here. Honestly, letting your soundboard be a little bit thicker definitely helps with that. I'm assuming he lives in a dry situation, okay? So he probably expects his guitars to dry out and feels that he can't control that, so he's trying to build. Maybe he's building in a shed in Arizona or something. So... yeah, man, that's tough. Thicker soundboard. Do understand that a thicker soundboard doesn't necessarily translate into an overbuilt guitar. So there's a relationship between the braces and the thickness of the top. If your top is thinner, essentially your braces have to be a little more stout to support that. If your top is very, very thick, your braces can be trimmed down more because the top is actually supporting itself a little bit more. Okay? Just want to point that out. So, you know, you could do a thicker top, and if you still want the guitar to sound pretty good, cut your braces a little smaller. So he also mentioned torrefaction or torrefied wood. So torrefied wood does two things. One, it's basically wood that's baked, okay? And it's baked in a special kiln where they bring the temperature up real high, like I think like 500 degrees, and they use vacuum pressure or something like that to suck all the oxygen out so that at that temperature, the wood doesn't just simply combust like it otherwise would if the oxygen was in there. And what you're doing with that process is you're replicating the natural aging process by cooking out the oils and other volatile compounds that are in the wood, which actually the aging process and the torrefaction process makes the wood more light and brittle because it cooks out those compounds. So if you imagine if you built a guitar and you injected it with some extra oil, well, what would that do? That would weigh it down. It would almost make the top kind of soggy. Now if you do the opposite and you pull that oil out, you have something that's more brittle and more responsive. okay? But notice I said the word brittle, because there's another interesting relationship here. You don't want things to split, so you don't want them to be brittle, okay? But unfortunately, brittleness is also related to good tone, okay? Responsiveness of the top. So you're walking a tightrope there, unfortunately. So I would not go, I don't think torrefied wood helps prevent splits. And I'm saying that kind of like I'm unsure, because torrefaction also makes the wood more stable. It makes it more brittle, but it makes it more stable. The reason it makes it more stable is because by replicating that aging process, another thing that you're doing is you've removed all of the moisture and the oils and compounds that are going to be removed over long periods of time. You did that quickly, and so now the wood is stable and it's not going to be moving anymore. So it's hard to say which wins out, right? You've got the brittleness component and the stability component. I don't know. I'm gonna, that's all I'm gonna say about that one. I'm sorry I don't have anything better. Actually, I do have something to add to that. I want to ask you, where are your splits coming from? Because it might be indicative of a different non-humidity related problem. Very commonly, you will see splits emanating from the edges of the bridge, the wings, or if you have splits coming from the edges of the fretboard tongue, because then you have a structural issue relating to either the cantilever effect of the neck and the fretboard tongue, or the tension on the bridge. That could be related to your bridge design or related to the bridge plate underneath and the connecting X-brace arms right there. You could just have too much tension on the guitar overall, which even with good design could be messing with things. Anyway, I just thought of that now. I thought, oh, well, he has splits. It might not be drying out. It might be something like that. And actually, a couple other things I want to say now that my brain's working and I'm thinking of stuff. Another thing you can do generally to help with splits is finish the inside of the top before you glue it down. A lot of builders, not a whole lot, but some, I should say, solo builders will apply some sort of brush-on finish, like a shellac, to the inside, you know, over their bracing and over the top, so that then your top is finished on the outside and the inside. Because part of the reason why drying out can become a problem is because there's a difference between the outside and the inside. Right? That's why warping and cupping happens, not because the wood is shrinking or expanding, but because it's shrinking or expanding more on one face than it is on the other. So you might have more moisture escaping on the inside face than on the finished outside face. And that should help. Lastly, one more thing. What kind of wood are you using? That's also where my head goes, because you didn't mention that. You might be using something that's problematic. Either the species isn't appropriate, or more commonly, it's just not well-seasoned wood. You're getting it from, you know, locally from like one of your neighbors or something like that. If it's not professionally kiln-dried wood, I'm always suspicious of it. Okay. Not that you can't use, you know, your friend's wood. Ooh, that sounded weird. Not that you can't use locally sourced wood, but you should be suspicious of it. That's all. All right, let's move on. Give me a guitar, please, brother. That's what MD Sarav Hussein says. Give me money. Okay? All right. Next, John Murrett says, awesome stuff. Just got some back plates here in Denver that warped, and your tip straightened them out in a couple of minutes from the shooting board. Thank you. Okay, great. That's always great to hear. So I did a video where I talked about how to fix warped plates, especially when you first get them from a supplier and before you glue them, before you book match them together. So one thing you can do, and I assume this is one of the things that helped him, is you can, so you have your plate and it's got a cup, and let's say that the concave side is down here and the convex is up here. You want to spray a little water on the concave side, which is always the dry side. Just spritz. You don't want to like pour water on it. Just a light spritz on the dry side, and then put it upside down in front of a window, or dry side down in front of a window. Okay, so the side you just sprayed will be facing down, and the wet side, which is the convex side, is now being bathed in sunlight. So essentially what you're doing is you're drying the wet side and wetting the dry side, and that actually balances it back out. And often when you do this, what you'll find is you'll do that once and it'll flip back completely in the opposite direction, meaning you had it like this and now it's like that. And all that means is that you do the same thing again, but a little bit less. You're trying to dial it in. So maybe you oversprayed it that first time, or you left it in the sun a little bit too long. So it's always kind of a trial and error thing, and it works because it actually happens very quickly. Meaning when you spray it and you put it in front of the window, it'll actually move into its new orientation pretty quickly, within like 5 minutes, and then you can take it and spray it again if you have to, or if it's good, go about your business. All right, let's see the next question. Joe Herrick writes, picky, I know, but height doesn't really increase strength by a factor of 3. It's a lot more. Factor and product refer to division and multiplication, respectively. Strength is a cubic function which increases and decreases significantly faster than multiplication by 3. Okay, that's great. I appreciate that, Joe, because I'm not great with math terms, honestly. But I do know that, well, let me back up slightly. What he's talking about is the cube rule, which I mentioned earlier, a la Irvin Samaji. The cube rule tells us that let's call this a beam here, or a brace, that the height of the brace affords us more strength than the width of the brace. So it always makes sense to have your braces be tall and skinny rather than short and wide. And I said that the height of the brace gives you strength by a factor of 3 compared to the width, and he's telling me that that's just the wrong term. So not by a factor of 3, because it's not 3 times, it's cubic. Okay. Dane Nichols writes, very timely, Eric. I'm building 2 OMs right now, staying to plans by Don McCrosty for these ones, but I like your back brace design a lot. Will you be adding a strip of wood over the back joint, or do you feel that's unnecessary with this brace pattern? So this is very particular to me. What he's talking about is the back strip that you normally see. If you look through the sound hole, normally there would be a strip of cross-grain spruce, most likely, going over the joint between the 2 book-matched halves. And that just reinforces that joint between the 2 halves a little bit. I have found it through my work and experience and research and just, everything, my entire career in guitar building, that strip is unnecessary if you do execute that joint in a consistently just perfect way. Which one thing I will say about my process is my book matching is just perfect. There's absolutely no light when I candlelight those two halves together. It's a perfect joint every time. And so I don't feel that it's necessary to reinforce that. I think that comes from factory production, where that joint is necessarily going to have to not be perfect every time. So it's a little, guarantee, a little bit of liability insurance on your joint there to put that strip in place. So I just don't do it. I will say, though, that I do not believe that I get some tonal benefit from excluding that thin cross-grained spruce strip. Really, I just don't do it because it's an extra step and I don't think I need to. That's really it. I don't think it's necessarily negative, so I encourage other people to continue to use that strip. In my online course, for example, the process I teach includes putting that strip down. So it's very common to have it. But no, to answer your question, it doesn't have, that's not because of the lattice brace design there. That's actually on all my guitars. Hampshire Piano writes, do all what is referred to as flat tops have radius bracing? Yes. So flat top guitars is a misnomer. This is one of the most common questions I get in the Q&As, actually, which is kind of funny. But I understand it. Flat top guitars is a misnomer. So the reason we call them flat tops is to differentiate them from arch top guitars, which, if you're looking at both of those guitars from a distance to the average, to the layman, to the average person, you would say, oh wow, that, if you just heard arch top and flat top, you'd go, okay, that's the flat top, that's the arch top. That dramatic thing with the F-holes and the recurve and the big bulge in the center. Clearly, that's an arch top guitar. So that's kind of how the term evolved to be, but actually flat tops are never, if they're built well and correctly, are never truly flat. There's a subtle radius on there, small enough that they appear to be flat, but it's there to give the proper structure that supports it against string tension and also prevents, the top from having splits and, all that stuff. So, okay, and that's all I got for you. Keep sending your questions in. I will be getting the new Discord channel up, hopefully in the next month and a half, 2 months, I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't take that long. And I will be able to more easily field your questions in there. I'm really excited about all of the cool things that are going to be happening in that Discord channel. There's going to be a seminar room. There's going to be video chat and office hours where I can answer questions there. This is all for members, of course, paid members. But that'll just be a better way for me to interact with you guys rather than scrolling through, YouTube as I am. Which is, it's still fun. It is what it is. And yeah, the spring workshops are coming up, so that's what I'm going to be working on today. I'll work on Guitar 106 a little bit, but I'll also have to prep some parts for those workshops. Those will be starting in the middle of April, and there's still 2 spots available in those workshops, so check them out at ericschaferguitars.com. All right, guys, see you in the next one. Keep building cool stuff, guitars hopefully, and bye for now. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.